So this is working? Yes.
Hello everyone.
Hi. So before we get started with our knowledge translation session, we want to get an idea from you guys where you're getting your knowledge from. So a lot of this is going to be social media, but social media I also kind of put in there podcasts, blogs, things like that, because I think they're all social. So just from a show of hands, how many people here get a lot of their knowledge from blogs? Okay, a couple. How about podcasts? Anybody listening to podcasts? Okay, definitely a lot more. And now, if you're on Twitter and you're somewhat active, just as long as you don't have a Twitter account that you haven't tweeted from for like 5 years. But if you're on Twitter and you're pretty active, just kind of hold your hands up. Good. And how many people interact with even some of the other presenters who've been here who spoke yesterday or today on Twitter? Great. And then how many people are on, let's say, Twitter and Facebook, where maybe you're getting some information from? So a lot more. How many people are just on Facebook? Okay, almost everyone. And how many people are on Instagram? Okay, so definitely a lot more. So we just wanted to get an idea of where you guys are getting your knowledge from, and because that's going to kind of take us into the next part of our discussion today. So I'll let you get.
So, but you are getting your knowledge also from some other sources, I assume. All right, good. We'll get to that. Now, one confession I have to make is that unfortunately, in the next 20 or so minutes that we will do, we will not be able to present any studies. So we won't have any graphs, and there's no data that we can really present to base our discussion on. So there's things that you can find, but we've been looking at, knowledge translation, sports medicine, social media, things like that, and go to the research, the hardcore research, go to the papers and all that. There's nothing. Nothing really that targets that. So, but if you do know of some interesting research in the topic, just let us know. All right. So, of course, there's no social media session without a hashtag. Now, we've chosen Twitter, and we are well aware that it's a choice that we've made. It's not arbitrary. I guess it's because it's what's commonly the most used, I guess, during sessions. And most of you here will be using Twitter in one way or another. So there's a hashtag, #BurnTwitterComp. And we will be doing a Twitter competition. And with competitions, there are prizes. So that's your incentive. Hopefully there's other incentives that we can get through to you to participate in that competition. So what's it about? Well, here it is. So this is taken from slides from this conference. And any idea whom it was taken from?
I can hear whispers.
Whispers. Whispers. Havad? No? Christian Torborg. Christian, can we get you to come up on stage and help us out here a little bit? So you're right, Mario, it's Christian. And so, Christian, what can you tell us about that slide?
That's my slide.
Is it?
Yeah.
Looks like yours. I mean, we took it off your talk.
Yeah, that's true. Probably, maybe it's not really my slide, but it's actually a colleague of mine, but maybe I forgot to put his hashtag on it.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh.
I stole it. So this is actually a slide by Michael Ratliff, who's a very good colleague of mine. And he said, I'm not going to that conference, so I thought he would never find out. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. So
you shouldn't fish and you shouldn't steal.
So you've got two takeaways here. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. So, in that slide, or those two slides actually, and there's things that have been discussed quite a bit in the last 2 days, and we would like to ask you to create a tweet around that slide that will be the best tweet and that will win the Burn Twitter competition and get you an amazing prize. So what are the rules? There are no rules. It's social media, right? You do whatever you want, except that you are limited by the Twitter thing. So there's some things you can do and some things you can't. You can't write the whole blog on Twitter. But one thing that's important, and I'll ask the help of Christian here again, is that we want to know whom you want to tweet it to. Because that's one key component is your message. You're going to craft a message based on that slide, and you have to know whom you are tweeting it to. Whom do you want to inform of whatever it is that you want to convey as a message? So we've got 5 categories: to your peers, as in clinicians, or to your peers, as in researchers. They may be the same, but they may be different, and your message might be a bit different. Do you want to tweet it to athletes, to the general public, or to community leaders, or people who can actually make management decisions to change some of the things that we maybe struggle with on a daily basis? Now, obviously, when you do a tweet, you tweet to everyone. Right? But you want to catch the attention of maybe a specific group more than another. So we'll ask you to decide which group you want to tweet to. And we'll have a roaring contest. Okay, so you just go and you yell, yes, if you want to tweet to peers, clinicians, and we'll go through the 5 of them. And we have a judge here. We have Christian. And Christian, you will decide who wins the decibel vote on this. All right? You ready? Now, if you want to get a good scream out, you need to get up. So please stand up. Please stand up.
See, we needed music.
Isn't it amazing that, well, I mean, we've spent 2 days here, and we've been sitting and sitting and sitting. So you get a chance to just stand up a little bit. All right, well, let's go. Number 1, do you want to go through them?
Sure. So you can either clap or scream or yell, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. But if you would like to tweet to your peers who are maybe you're targeting clinicians, so clap or scream. Kind of. Okay. All right. How about to researchers? Show of hands. Okay, definitely less. And how about if you want this tweet to go out, you really want to target your athletes? Okay. And the general public. And then finally, community leaders. That's a no. That is a clear no. So, Christian, what do you think?
Community leaders, huh?
So I would say I would go for 1. Clinicians or athletes, but yeah, that was a difficult one. 1, we say 1.
1?
Yeah.
Okay. So.
That was the highest clap.
Okay. So what you're going to do is you want to use on this
Sorry,
tweet.
sorry. Did I say 1?
You did. Did you mean to say something else?
Oh, I meant 1.
Okay.
You meant 1.
So what you're going to do when you send out this tweet is you want to use that hashtag #BurnTwitterComp because that's how we're going to be able to track your hashtag. And then you can take a picture of this slide if you want and put it up. Or do we just have Christian's slide on its own? No. Just take a picture of this slide. Make sure you put #BurnTwitterComp in it, and you can tag Christian or Michael since he stole it from him. I guess either one will do. And then what you want to do is you want to try and craft a message as to what do these graphics mean, and how would you tweet that to a colleague that's a clinician so that they can kind of understand what we get the honor of seeing live when they don't. Fair? And then
that's good.
we will pick a winner by the end of today, and then we have some prizes for first, second, and third.
First, second, and third.
First,
we have
second,
three
and third.
prizes.
And then how do we decide who wins?
Oh, how do we do that?
I don't know. We'll ask Christian. He'll decide.
Like
Since it's his slide. He just got roped into this like an hour ago.
I take bribes.
So the photo is tweeted. If you follow the hashtag SportSuisse2018, 2018, you get the photo. I just tweeted that. Okay?
Perfect.
You have it. Cool.
Perfect. So, tweet, and you can tweet as many times as you want as well. It doesn't have to only be one tweet. Just make sure you use the hashtag #BurnTwitterComp so that we can find it.
Excellent.
Good?
So we've got a few things we want to talk about.
Yes.
So I can go?
You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
go.
you
I
can
just
go.
had a text from Michael. He was a little upset, but he said he didn't know where he got it from in the first place. So
So he's not going to press charges.
no.
Okay, good. So where do we go with this? Knowledge translation. What is it?
So when you think about knowledge translation, it's obviously taking what you know and being able to translate that and disseminate that to a wider audience. But if you look at some 5 key points, and we can start maybe with an n=1. So if you're a clinician or even a researcher, you're translating knowledge every day. You're translating that to your patients, you're translating that, if you're a researcher, to your colleagues. And so we kind of took it as, let's start with knowledge translation with an n=1, and then we can expand it to n=millions, I guess, if you're using social media, because your message can certainly reach that. So some 5 key points, and I'll do a couple and then I'll kind of kick it over to you. But the first thing, let's say you're one-on-one with someone, whether that be a patient or colleague, the first thing you want to do is listen to the patient first or your colleague first and find out, how do they perceive information? What is their health literacy? Both of those things are going to make a huge difference when you're trying to educate that person. And then you want to decide, what is the best way to communicate? And we've got a lot of options when it comes to communication. I'm a clinician. There's a lot of options when it comes to communicating with our patients. So Boris, I'll have you kind of take it from here and talk about some ways that maybe you communicate with your patients that you have felt was successful, and then maybe we'll take it to you guys to see if you have any suggestions for the group that maybe you've used one-on-one.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, as we said, patient beliefs, and we've touched on these. Some of the speakers have in the last couple of days. It's extremely important to know where they come from. So I guess one of the first things I will do whenever there's a complex problem like hip pain that's been chronic, or groin pain, and obviously they've seen a lot of people, they've heard a lot of different things, so we need to know where they come from and what they've heard. That's very important. And then they might have been looking for information somewhere, most likely online. So what I will do, I'll ask them, okay, so what have you found? What have you read? What do you understand of your pain and your problem? And it's very interesting because oftentimes there's many things that come out, and if you don't go through that step, you might just miscommunicate after that, because you are going to address some of the constructs that you have with regards to the presenting pathology or clinical presentation, and not integrating the comprehension of the patient. So that's the first step, and that will probably help me to look maybe online. So I'll have the screen that I share with the patient, and I'll say, okay, well, you've searched for that, so I'll Google it, and I'll go to images maybe, and I'll see a few photos, and I'll say, okay, have you seen something like that? Yes. Okay, so then maybe I'll talk about the anatomy, and maybe we'll start to have a discussion on the pathology or the different signs, etc. That's one way. Does anybody want to comment or have an approach to try to get the beliefs and the understanding of the patient first? Do we have a few mics that can travel around? Anybody wishes to contribute, share some experience?
And then while you think, what I'll just say to piggyback on what Boris said is, when you're dealing with patients, I mean, how many of you have had your patients go to Dr. Google first? Show of hands? Like almost everyone. I know in the United States, a study by, I think, PricewaterhouseCoopers that came out last year or the year before said that 80% or 85% of Americans are online and on social media. And of that 80%, 75% of them go online specifically for medical information. So think about that when your patients are coming to you, that they have already probably done some extensive Googling and Facebooking their symptoms. And so when it comes to us, that knowledge translation of good evidence-based information that we've gotten in the past day and a half becomes vitally important.
So we've got to get buy-in, because at some stage down the line of that consultation, we are going to offer some treatment, some additional tests maybe, and we need to get buy-in. But before we do that, we need to have them on board to really know what it is that we're going to be doing. For some problems, one thing I like to do is to take a blank piece of paper and to draw something. And it may be, and I'm a terrible drawer, but it may be just a graph sometimes that I construct with them. When we talk about load, for example, I will try to get that graph built with them, so they'll contribute to what we put on the X and the Y axis, and how we picture things, and the progression and the timelines, etc. And so that way they own what is being drawn a little bit, because it comes from them as much as it comes from me. I guide it because I know what I want to get to, but it comes from them as well. So that's one way that I use for certain problems to get them on board. Does anybody else do something like that, or draw with their patients?
Yeah,
Sure.
people.
Who has a whiteboard that they pull up, or that they can just a big board and they draw on a whiteboard? Okay, there's a few hands at the back over there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Who has a digital whiteboard? So it's like a big touch screen that can play as a whiteboard, and you can just draw. All right, good. There's one. I wish I had one. They're kind of expensive, but they're cool because you can just instantly save an email. And what I'll do with a sheet of paper that I draw, I'll then tear it and give it to the patient. And when 3 or 4 weeks later they come back and they open their wallet and take the piece of paper out, I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere. With the drawing, there's other ways to use them as well, no? Do you have the
No,
oh,
I
where's the
gave
remote?
it to you.
Christian stole it.
Oh.
Oh. Here we are.
Right, so when you can kind of take that one-on-one drawing, if you will, and expand it to reach hundreds, thousands, or millions using infographics. So we kind of pulled these infographics just as what we feel like are good examples of using infographics to reach a lot of people. Obviously, people love infographics on social media. So if you're on Twitter or you're on Instagram, people love infographics. Are they our colleagues? Are they the general public? Not sure. But infographics are a great way to maybe take a study and break it down into something that's more visually appealing. But like people have said yesterday and today, just because the infographic is there doesn't mean you don't read the study.
Yeah, that might be, we should get into that. Now, we've got one on sleep. Obviously, we talked a bit about sleep this morning, and recovery, very important. And the other one, I just wish to acknowledge the work done by our National Olympic Committee, Swiss Olympic, and some of the specialists. This is Danny Beer, a sports psychologist, and Patrick Nowak, who's in the room, the Chief Medical Officer for the Olympic Games. And they've created those infographics for the athletes in the different national languages so that they can prepare for the Olympic Games and for their competitions on topics just like sleep, hygiene, etc. So great job. And really acknowledging the importance of conveying the message in a different way. And so they've gone from talking about it to saying, well, actually, we're going to do it. And so that's great because they've been supported by Swiss Olympic, and that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. So what are the pitfalls of these infographics?
So some of the pitfalls, I guess, of infographics and of communication online as a whole are we tend to be in an echo chamber. So, I think we can confidently say that the majority of people here are evidence-based. I would say we're all evidence-based, but I know you're not supposed to say all or every. So figure the majority of people here are going to be evidence-based practitioners, but maybe that's not the case with people around, with practitioners or clinicians around the world. So oftentimes we can get stuck in an echo chamber where maybe we're not really seeing other people's points of view. So I think that's one big pitfall.
So we tend to retweet or share the things that we like, and we follow people that we like and that confirm what we think. This falls under the confirmation bias. We all know about that. And at some stage, I guess, if we don't pay attention to this and if we don't listen to the other side, or if we don't follow people that we don't necessarily agree with, then we tend to be isolated within that echo chamber. Mm-hmm. And that's true for all kinds of social media. So we've got to be careful about that. Mm-hmm. Now, the infographics, the goal of an infographic is to simplify things, right? So, and there's a lot of examples of multiple studies being put into infographics, and you have to simplify because that's what you want to do. You want the message to be simple. Just a few numbers, just a few figures. But obviously, that comes at a price, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between simplification and dumbing things down. And we don't want to be caught in a situation where we've dumbed something down to the point where the original intent of whether it be a paper or, yeah, let's just use that for example, where the original intent of the research paper is lost. And then I think that can kind of get you in trouble. So there are some great examples of people out there who are simplifying work without dumbing it down. So some examples of those would be...
Jan? You mean Jan?
What's that? Yeah, no. Yeah. Or some examples of like people who are doing simplification very well. One would be Lorimer Moseley. So if you don't know Lorimer, I would highly suggest you look it up. He is not specifically on social media, but you can look at, we have it up there, at Pain Revolution. So he had a great TEDx Adelaide talk about pain and was really able to take the complexity of pain and simplify that into something that anyone can understand, whether it be a clinician or your mom or your neighbor or even like a 9-year-old, really. So how many people here have seen this TED Talk? Oh, nice. Yeah, so that's a great way, this is a wonderful way of being able to take really complex information and simplifying that. And I actually use this TED Talk with, I would say, the majority of my patients.
But one thing though, it's, it is for everybody to be able to understand, but you've got to mind the fact that he's got a strong Australian accent. So it's not for everyone to understand. Great TED Talk.
Yes.
There's another thing also that comes from our friends down under.
Yeah, so Christian Barton at La Trobe University, and I know there's a lot of people here from La Trobe, but he started this Trek initiative, and they are really a forward-facing, consumer-facing initiative, and they have infographics, they have blog posts, they have podcasts. If I'm missing anything, people from La Trobe can... Did I miss anything? No? Okay. So another sort of great, I think they're doing a good job at simplifying information for the general public. Because in the end, it's great that we're all here and we can discuss this research, but then it's upon us to disseminate that and translate that, not just to our patients, but maybe to the people that follow us on social media or to lectures that you give in your communities.
Now, there's another tool that one can use, and Karen, who else but you can talk about this? It's the podcast. So you've been running a podcast, and can you tell us a little bit more about why you've chosen that and what do you get from it?
So the reason I chose to do, let's say, a podcast over a blog is quite simply I hate writing and I'm not good at it. So I just chose I knew that was not going to be my avenue. So I chose hosting a podcast because one, I love learning and I love talking to people. And two, let's say you can talk to the author of a paper and not only talk about the paper, but what was the intent behind the paper? And how does then that paper get translated to actual clinical practice? Because as we know, a lot of research is done in a very controlled situation. And how many people here are clinicians? So when you're a clinician, sometimes that paper what they did in the paper obviously does not work exactly for you in your clinic. So it's great. I think podcasts are a great way to get those authors on and get clinicians on to talk about how they've used the research in their practice. So I like it that's my favorite thing.
And the great thing about what you're doing is that you're bringing the people in. Actually, you're letting them express what it is that they do and the why behind it. And it's not just you commenting on it.
Right.
So, and that's one thing also with, like, let's say the blogs and all the other things. If it's the authors of the data, the research that's behind it, who actually do that translation, there's a chance that the intent of the research is going to be there. Now, obviously, we live in a communication world where simplification has its dangers, and we have discussed that yesterday morning a little bit about graphs that, they need to look good, so we'll put colors and things like that. And sometimes the truth or the extension of the data presented is not there. So, but it's because we are compelled to simplify sometimes. There's another thing when you're on social media that can happen. Trolls. Do you mind saying something about trolls, what they are?
Well, this particular troll is under a bridge in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. But I think trolls like this, they come in all shapes and sizes. And they may be someone who maybe they haven't read the paper but are still really like to comment on it in maybe not the best way, or kind of using perhaps language that might not be the most professional, but I think they come in different shapes and sizes, and a lot of stances are, you don't want to feed the trolls, but sometimes if you can have like a good conversation, it can be a nice debate and a way to maybe change someone's mind, or maybe they'll change yours.
Okay, so a troll, for those of you who may not be familiar, is somebody who will comment or maybe a bit aggressively state something on something you've tweeted or something you've shared on social media, will disagree continuously and will continue to be behind you. And the more you engage, the more you feed the troll, and it's never going to end. So at some stage, I guess you have to end it.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to like cut and run.
Yeah.
Christian probably gets a good amount of trolling.
Yeah, well, he will now because he's stolen a slide, so I'm sure Michael will troll him.
Yeah.
And sometimes you said you've got to cut it, right? And that's it for us because we're off, the time's off. So we were worried we wouldn't know what to discuss, but we could talk about this for a bit longer. Anyways, for me, my personal message would be social media are there. We are facing that communication tool and all the time. We can choose to use it or we can ignore it. If you choose to use it, know what it's for, how you can use it, how you can get better and improve the way you use it, the way you post, the way you interact, or the way you follow also, and not just following friends and family, but also have an ear for the people outside the echo chamber. You might learn something and you might question what it is that you're doing, like pushing these wheels on Lego. Ouch.
Great.
Our competition, it's on. We're going to deliver the winner. When are we going to announce the winner?
Like before the closing in a couple of, 2 hours from now, Mario?
Something like that. So you have
something like that.
You have a bit of time.
So you have a bit of time. So you'll win some prizes. Just make sure you use the hashtag TwitterCompBurn.
And if you're not social media savvy, you can go to this book. And you can go back to classical literature and books and philosophy and see how it leads to Twitter in one way. And this is an interesting book to consider.
Oh, 4:45? Okay, so yeah, we'll announce the winner at like 4:45. Good?
Right. Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.